Waiting for the laptop to boot up. So I can actually see the comments. Hope everybody's well this morning, considering. Definitely an interesting night last night, I'll say. I have a very old laptop. 12, maybe 15 years. Windows 10. It works. Very slowly, but it works. Still nobody logged in yet. Not sure if we'll get anybody. I'm an hour late, 2 hours late. I wanted to do this at 8. But like I said in my update post, considering all that's happened in the last 12 hours, 24 hours maybe, I guess it's okay that I was a little bit late. I'm guessing Corporal's Corner did not upload a video this week. I don't see it. Usually it's there by now. I know I saw a post from him earlier this week where he did remind people that he was dropping his cold-handled skillets on Sunday morning at 10. So I'm assuming that they dropped. I haven't looked. I already have one. Yep, I do not see a Corporal's Corner. Dead Wolf Resistance. All right, maybe he's going to log in. Not sure. See if I can pull this live up so I can see this. So I can see the comments. If y'all just bear with me. Here we go. All right, and there we are. We got live comments. Good morning, everyone. There we go. I'm there. All right. Good morning. Got my coffee. Oh, do we have a lot to unpack today? Wow. I don't even know where to start. I probably should have made some notes. I need to keep my glasses on because I can't see who all's here. There's a few people. Good, good, good. First of all, I hit 100 subscribers today. Or not today, yesterday. Maybe the day before yesterday. It was this week. 102, I believe, was the last count. Let me look real quick again and see, because it changes. Yep, 102 subscribers. Wow. I'm mind blown. I did not think for a minute that I would even get close to that. I don't do this. I mean, you see, I don't have any sponsors. I'm on the fence about monetizing. Personally, I don't like the commercials. It's kind of a pain in the ass to hit the skip button all the time. So I may try to do this without ever monetizing or, doing anything. 1,000 before you got banned. Hey, that's a good goal. What is this? Pop-ups coming in. Why do I get that nonsense? Almost 1,000. That's huge. I didn't even expect 100. To be honest, I really wasn't sure what my expectations were going into this. Like I've said before in other videos, it's just kind of stuff that I've done, most of my life, if not all my life. I put up uh, a picture on my Facebook page last week, I believe it was. It was just a cartoon. I guess you call it a meme. I don't know. Winnie the Pooh was sitting in a chair and he had a bunch of stuff around him, and he said, I'm not a prepper. This might be useful someday specialist. And that's kind of how I've always looked at it is, if it's broken, obviously throw it away. But, if it's not, you never know. You might need it. And I'm not one to be a big fan of when I do need something, happen to just run out and get it. It's always nice when I have, some screws or nails or a board or a bracket or something. I can just go and get it and finish the task that I'm working on and, be done with it. So again, over 100 subscribers, mind blowing. Never would have expected that. I guess maybe people are getting something out of my channel. Maybe if not a good laugh, because I did get a comment the other day on the video that I did with the Amazon bag. Where basically I sat down on Amazon and, I just started putting things in a list, like a save list, and I didn't order it all at once. I spread it out over a few weeks, just so it wouldn't have been such a big, financial hit, all at once. I think I $50 or $60 each time I ordered stuff. I don't remember. And I'm pretty sure my total came in under $180, which isn't really that bad. I mean, I've seen a ton of emergency bag videos and bug out bag videos where, they got all this gear laid out. And, I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, I know for a fact that knife is $300 and, that multi-tool is $90. And, it probably doesn't take long. 2 tornadoes Friday night. Wow. That's scary. 2. We've had one a couple years ago came through here in my area. I was actually on my way to get a coffee from the local convenience store, and I saw the clouds moving in, and I quick dipped underneath of which probably wasn't the smartest thing. I thought it was just a heavy thunderstorm, probably some hail. That's usually what we get around here. I didn't know it was a tornado at the time. And I dipped under the awning at the gas station of the convenience store where I was at, just so the hail wouldn't, pound my truck. And it went through in just a few minutes, and I got my coffee. And then on my way back home, I realized that it had done a lot more damage than I had anticipated, because it took me about an hour and a half to get home, and normally it's a 6-minute ride. There was trees down and roads blocked, and I, of course, wasn't prepared for that, because it wasn't something that I normally see or have to deal with. So there was no chainsaw in the truck. There was no handsaw in the truck. And I got a road that, accesses my house, or at least my neighborhood, and I couldn't go any further. There was just trees down and cars were parked, and I had to find another way around. And the route that I chose, I got lucky, and there was a tree down blocking the road that I was trying to use to get all the way around to my subdivision. But the local, farmer or property owner, or whatever, he had a small tractor, and he was out there with the tractor with the bucket moving the tree so, cars could get by. So I was only held up for about a half an hour or so watching him, move the stuff out of the way. But again, wasn't something I was prepared for. Now, since then, I've put a saw in the truck. Of course, if there's ever going to be a tornado warning from my area again, I would probably and I had to go out, I would probably throw the chainsaw in the truck, just to be safe. But, one of those things that catches you by surprise. But where was I? Oh, yeah, my subscribers. I got a negative comment, which I've had a couple. And, they really don't bother me too much, but I do feel like I want to mention them, just because to me they're fucking ridiculous. The bag video that I did with the Amazon bag, and you can look, it's still there. I even answered the comment, and I'm not even sure if I answered it correctly or not, because I'm not really sure what the guy was referring to. Um, he said it was a horrible video, and that anybody with a camera can make a video, and I was the blind leading the blind, and I'm not quite sure how that is accurate, because all I did is order a bunch of budget gear, throw it in a bag, and show you that uh, you can put together an emergency bag to keep in your car or to give to a loved one or one of your children. And that was kind of my intent, was to give it to one of my kids, to where if they're in a situation, they all drive now, they got jobs, and they're out and about, and if something would happen, at least they would have something more than a cell phone that doesn't work because the power's out or the battery died or whatever. So I thought it was a decent idea. I asked a couple of my friends if it would be something that they would watch, and they were like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I see these videos of these bags, and the hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands, and if it's possible to put one together for just a couple $100 or less, then that's a good topic for people." you know so I did it. I'd spent a few weeks, and about a little under $180, I think it was, when I added it all up. And I thought it was decent. Now I will say that I'm using not here, I'm on my phone here, I don't have the GoPro running, but normally when I make my videos, I have used, I bought it off Facebook Marketplace, GoPro 4. It's a GoPro 4. It's probably 10 years old. It works. It makes videos. That was my goal. I think I paid the guy $30 for it, $35, something like that. And then I bought a tripod, which is in the other room right now. I was working on the Blueprint AR build in the back room a couple of days ago, and I left it back there, I think, is where it's at. I don't know. It's around here. But it's a $12 tripod off Amazon. I don't have some big fancy camera crew and all these people, helping me out doing this. I did get a nephew of mine reached out yesterday or the day before, offered to make my thumbnails for me. So I may, Eddie, if you're watching, I may take you up on that, because, coming up with the ideas for the content, or putting it together so it kind of makes sense to people and is simplified, and then actually making the content, filming, making the videos, and then editing the videos and making a thumbnail and doing the descriptions and all that. It takes time. In fact, in a minute, I'm going to tell you about the next two I have coming out, which I'll probably release literally right here while I'm sitting here. I have them all loaded up. They're private. I've only let one person. I have a buddy out in Arizona that whenever I do a video, occasionally I'll shoot him a link privately, just so he can, kind of like get a preview of, a pre-screening or whatever. He can watch it. He didn't, make any comments, which I expected something from him, but I didn't get anything. So I don't know if it's a good video or not, but we'll talk about those in a minute. But, again, it's a lot more work than people realize. And, Dead Wolf, he said he almost had 1,000 subscribers. So, what it takes to take time out of your regular daily life to film everything that you're doing, and that's really all I'm doing is, I take a little extra time in addition to, the time I put into everything else, to actually make a video, and then I take the time to edit it and get it uploaded. And, then I have to come back a day or two later and check comments so I can answer people. And, it's a lot more. People don't realize it. And then you get these clowns that, just ban the clowns. I don't know if I'm going to ban them, because, I think the book was called Private Parts. The tripod is old oil drums stacked in log sections with them. Yeah, that's creative. Back in the 80s, I believe, Howard Stern put out a book called Private Parts, and I read it. I was always, watching Howard Stern or listening to Howard Stern on the radio, as well as in Washington, or just outside of DC, there was a radio station that had a DJ on there called the Grease Man, and they were pretty entertaining. I grew up listening to these guys, and I always wondered, how it was that Howard Stern was so freaking popular, and the majority of his popularity was people hated him. And I read in that book, and I think he even said it in an interview where uh, bad publicity is better sometimes than good, meaning he'll take all of the haters and all the clowns because they're watching his show. They constantly talk negatively about him and they got nothing good to say, but they still watch his show. And I thought, that's smart, man. That's the guy was a genius when it came to that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, I don't know if I'll ban them. I mean, if it becomes an issue, I will. But for now, I'm just going to let bygones be bygones. And you know, the few negative comments that I have had kind of gives me the impression that these people that make these negative comments, they watch videos on YouTube or whatever other platform people on, and they critique it, and it gives me the impression that they feel that if there ever is some sort of big catastrophic emergency, which it very possible could happen, they're going to be the only ones left, because they got their little laser pointer, or they know how to make good quality Steven Spielberg level videos, and I mean, if my budget allows it, I may step up to a better camera. But for now, what I have works. It's not the most efficient system, I'll say, but it works. I can take it mobily. I got one of those harness things that you put on your chest that your camera connects to, and it even came with a thing that wraps around your head where you can put the camera on your head. I got it off Amazon. I used it once on my hiking video, where I kept the camera on my chest and I went for a hike and took a bunch of footage, and that video didn't do very well. I guess people don't give two shits about me hiking. So I don't know if I'll do more hiking videos. Maybe I got a couple of bigger overnighters planned for later in the year, that I'll probably do. But that's a kind of a collaboration with another channel, not a YouTube channel. It's a Facebook page kind of thing. You've heard me talk about him before, the 302 Outdoors, my good buddy Bruce. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun. But to sum it all up, I'm extremely ecstatic and grateful and astonished that I actually hit 100. I'm not sure how I'll respond to hitting 1,000, because that to me seems somewhat incomprehensible. I'm not sure if that'll happen, but we'll see. I didn't think I'd hit 100, but here we are. So that's that. Even got to talk about the haters a little bit, which, if y'all are watching, hey, how's it going? Hopefully this video quality is a little bit better than my GoPro footage. I did adjust a setting on the GoPro. I had it on, I forget the setting I had it on, but I bumped it up to 4K. So maybe that'll make a difference. I don't know. But the files are huge. Like, it's got a card that goes in the side of the GoPro. It saves the video to the card, and then you stick the card in the laptop and transfer it. And it takes anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes just to transfer the video file to the laptop, so I can actually work with it with the editing software. And then once I get it all edited, which it takes a while to like buffer, where I put it into the editing software, and it kind of lays the whole video out. I'm sure you've seen these. I don't know. I'm new to it, so I'm still learning. And it takes a while to do that. So kind of I transfer it, and then I walk away, and I come back 30 minutes later or so, and it's there. And then I pull it up and I open it up in the editing software, and then I lay it all out in the editing window or whatever, and it buffers for a while. And otherwise it doesn't time right. It'll give me the audio, but the video just freezes. So I got to let it think for a while before I can actually work with it. So that takes a while. Sometimes, 20, 30 minutes. I don't know. I don't time it. And then, it takes me a while to edit it. I cut off the beginning because I don't use the remote control on the GoPro. And I have one. I just haven't used it yet. I actually push the button and walk around in front of the camera. So I kind of edit that part out. And I don't do a lot of editing in the middle. Even though I say and a lot, I don't edit none of that out. I know there's a big scare about AI taking over, content creation. And personally, I'm not a big fan of AI created videos. When I click on something to watch it, if it looks interesting, and as soon as I realize it's AI, I'm done. I don't want to hear that. And in fact, I even follow a couple of channels that are, I'm pretty sure they're AI based, where somebody's actually putting together a script and a bunch of pictures and some little video clips, and you know they call it a prepping channel, but really it's just AI based. And I don't really get a lot of entertainment, or it doesn't catch my interest. I'd rather see a person, like Corporal's Corner, and every Sunday. I mean, not today, obviously, because he didn't put one up, or it hasn't come up yet. But the way he's out there in the woods, building a shelter and making a fire and cooking some food, and man, I love that shit. And I'm sure a lot of people do, because I think he's got over 1 million subscribers. So obviously, I'm not the only one that likes that kind of content. So I don't think that AI is going to completely take over. I think it's going to create maybe some separation for a while, but I think people are always going to come back to, a person, somebody that's actually interacting and doing it, as far as the creation goes. So I'm not really worried about that. Yeah, so a lot to dive into. But again, at the end of the day, I'm grateful for those that do watch and check out my videos and comment and give me some feedback. And certainly if there's anything you want to see, I do a ton of stuff, not just the videos that I've made so far. I do a ton of stuff. And I'll certainly, in fact, the next thing I want to talk about real quick, I have over here on the table next to me, isn't something I've put in the channel. I mentioned it a few times, but it's not something I do regularly, is fishing. Fishing. This is a very short fishing rod. It's only like 3 foot. You can't even see it in the camera. Yeah. I picked this up about 2-3 years ago. I haven't even used it yet. You see, I still got the plastic on the cork. But I had put in my comments weeks ago on one of the videos that I made about putting a mini fishing kit. In fact, I did a review of this little foldable fishing thing that I'm still not 100% sure I want to rely on in any type of fishing situation. I will take it out and play with it just to see, its level of quality. But I had some people tell me, no, it's pointless to put a fishing kit in your emergency bag, or it's a waste of time, yada yada yada. The region that I live in, I am constantly near water. I don't live near the coast, but I live close enough to the coast and, of course, the Chesapeake Bay, to where there's so many tributaries. I'm constantly going over bridges, and there's creeks and rivers, and there's no shortage of places to where if I did have to walk home, cool. Appreciate it. I'm only going to be here for about an hour. I got some pressure washing I got to do, and I want to do it before it gets hot. It's supposed to be like 90-some degrees today, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so I ordered this. I got this tiny little fishing box here. It doesn't have dividers, which I didn't pick up on that when I ordered it. I would have liked, to have some dividers or something in here, but it doesn't. It's just a little, waterproof. It's got a pretty decent gasket in there, so I'm assuming it's fairly waterproof. It's a Plano. It is the Stowaway 3400. And they make a couple different sizes, the 3500, the 3700, and I believe this is the smallest one that they had. And I just wanted something I could put a little bit of gear in here, maybe a few jig heads, maybe some hooks, maybe some plastic baits, rubber worms, or Mr. Twisters is probably that's one of my go-tos. I'm a big fan of white Mr. Twisters, so I'll probably throw some of them in there. Maybe a few spinners, little small spinners or something. I mean, this rod's only going to have, I have no idea what size line's on here. It's been on here for probably close to 30 years. I've had this little rod probably close to 30 years. It was my little mini ultralight. You see it's got dust all over it because it's been a while since it's been used. I do have an extra spool for it. It did come, I think it's a Daiwa. Yeah, Daiwa Quantum. Not a bad little rig, I've caught boatloads and boatloads of fish with this little thing. It did not come with this rod. I bought this separately. I forget where I picked this up at. It's just a Shakespeare. It wasn't hateful. Dock runner is what it's called. It's an ugly stick, which I have several ugly sticks, longer ones. But I figured this will be perfect, to go along with my emergency bag, or at least keep in the truck, just in case. It's fairly lightweight, and then a little bit of tackle in here. It's not really going to add a lot of extra weight to it. So I think I did, mention in a previous video that I wasn't sure I was going to put a fishing kit in there. And of course, I had some people say, no. But after weeks of thinking about it and watching as I'm driving for work, all of this water, I'm going by in these bodies of water and streams and tributaries that, why not? It's kind of stupid not to. If I do have to, traverse a long distance, in an emergency on foot, I only have maybe 3.5 or 4 days worth of food in my emergency bag. So it wouldn't take nothing to, stop and drown a plastic bait for a half an hour. See if I get lucky, get a little crappie or, a little smallmouth or something. It's better than nothing. And the amount of effort that it takes, to, throw that bait a couple of times, and what little bit of weight this is going to add, I think it's acceptable. Not sure how I'm going to pack it all together yet. I'll worry about that later. But that was one thing that I did want to talk about. I did make the decision to put a small, and I suggested if you can put something together that's really small, it doesn't take up a lot of space, it's fairly lightweight, what's the harm? I thought about getting like the old school, back window gun rack thing. I've seen them in pickup trucks where they put the brackets on the back window. You can hang your rifle from it. I have a cap on my pickup, and I could probably mount that inside the cap on one of the cap windows, and I could put a full fishing rod back there, which I still may consider doing. I'm not sure. It's just one of those things that's in my head that I haven't, executed yet. So, let me know your thoughts. I don't carry a fishing rod around with me 24/7. I know there's lots of guys that do. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's 100 subscribers. Wow. I'm still mind blown by that. And it's going to take me a while to process all that. So, but again, I'm really appreciative. Thank everybody that watches. And again, if there's anything that you'd like to see, like some fishing videos or something, just let me know. I'll take the camera. I don't always take the camera when I'm, out doing my thing. Like, I've seen prepper channels where they take the camera with them to Walmart or to Costco, and I go to Costco once a month. It's kind of like a regular thing we do. With Costco, when you buy the premium membership, it's like $120 or $130 a year. Part of that deal is if you go regularly enough, and by the end of the year you spend X amount of dollars at Costco, they award you basically the value of the membership. So going into the next year, the membership actually is ended up being free. So that's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, well, if all I got to do is make sure I come once a month and spend X amount of dollars each month, I'm doing that anyway. So why not? Now, I don't take the camera, with me, obviously, to Costco, because you've never seen me do any, Costco haul videos or anything like that. And there's no shortage of them. Everybody knows what Costco has. They got big bags of beans and big bags of rice and cases of canned goods and all this other great stuff that we all buy. So, but if somebody wants to see me shop around Costco, let me know. I'll take a camera with me, and, we'll see how it goes. But, for now, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I do have a few upcoming videos. You might have seen this video or this item. Oh, this thing is heavy. This is a 5-gallon bucket, obviously. It's food grade. I put this together several years ago. I have a spigot on it, so you can open and close it. This is a hose connection for a garden hose, so I can screw a garden hose on here. But basically what this is a water filter. And I did a water filtration video a couple of weeks ago that it got a pretty good viewership on it, you know, but I didn't really dive deep into this. I just kind of brushed across it, you know, and in here I got my cotton batting, and I got my activated carbon. I do not have the sand or the pea gravel or the, actually I just bought 57 stone in a bag, like all-purpose gravel. But I think I might make a video actually putting these together. I have not used it yet. I know it'll work. You know, I've used things like this before, so I'm 100% certain it will work. But for those that don't know how to build a DIY water filter, I think I'm going to do a video on how to put it all together, how to layer your media, and then actually we have a pond in the neighborhood, not far from me. I'll go down to the pond. I'll scoop up a bucket of nasty ass pond water, and we'll run it through this filter, and I'll put it in a mason jar or something where you can see through it, and you'll see that it comes out crystal clear. So that is something I have planned. I was going to try to do that today, but with all that's going on right now, I kind of pushed that aside. But a couple other things I did. I don't know if any of you have seen on YouTube. There's a boatload of videos out there about homemade or DIY waterproofing, and a couple of those caught my attention. I've seen guys where they would melt paraffin wax and mix it with some sort of solution like mineral spirits or naphtha, you know, different things. You know, they melt the wax down, and they're using toilet rings from Home Depot. They're like $5 or less. It's you know, a wax ring that you can buy at Home Depot for cheap. You know, and then a quart of some sort of solution, whether it be mineral spirits, or I don't know if naphtha is still available. It's not in my area, but I can't speak for all areas. And I'm sure there's other chemicals. I'm not a chemist. So if anybody out there knows, you know, what you can mix with paraffin wax, and basically what happens is you melt it down, and then you coat your cloth or your material, and it makes it waterproof, like waxed canvas. And I've seen a couple other words where they use silicone. Well, that was the route that I took. You've seen in some of my videos, I still use an Alice pack. It's my go-to. I've used it for well over 30 years, maybe close to 40. Actually, yeah, close to 40 at this point is how long I've used that pack. And I don't think it's waterproof. It may have been when it was new, sometime in the 60s. Hell if I know. But I normally put a trash bag down in it and put all my stuff in the trash bag, and then, you know, and that's how I kind of, it's like a pack liner. That's how I've always done it. Back in the day, I used a lawn and leaf bag because, you know, we didn't have contractor bags, you know, back in the 80s. We had lawn and leaf bags. So I'd scavenge a lawn and leaf bag out of my grandparents' cupboard in the kitchen and stick it down in there, and that kind of what. So a couple of days ago, I was out. My youngest daughter and we went out, and I stopped at Home Depot to see if I could get naphtha, and I couldn't. So I bought mineral spirits, and I have some silicone here. So I bought a brand new bucket I'm going to use. I'm going to pull the Alice pack off the frame, probably remove the shoulder straps, the waist belt, that kind of stuff, and just kind of break it down to just the bag, the pack itself, without, you know, as much webbing and straps. Whatever's attached to it, I'll leave, but I can separate the shoulder straps and the waist belt off of it. None of that's original. It's all been replaced. But I think I'm going to try to waterproof my Alice pack. So I'm going to make a video doing that, because I've seen these videos where they mix the silicone and the solution to dilute it down, and then they dip a bed sheet in it and then hang it, let it dry. The solution, whatever you use, mineral spirits or whatever, naphtha, it evaporates, leaving behind the silicone. And I saw a video of a guy who made one, and he put it over a wood pile along with a regular blue tarp from Home Depot or Harbor Freight or whatever. And 2 years later, that blue tarp, just from the wind and the weather, was shredded. And that's what blue tarps do. If you've ever tarped anything outside, you know it's a one-season deal. That very rarely do you get 2 seasons out of a blue tarp. At least I've never gotten 2 seasons out of a blue tarp. They start to delaminate and fall apart, and then they rip, and they're great for a season, but after that it's done. But he took this regular bed sheet. It was a king size bed sheet that he put in this silicone solution and let it dry, and he put it over this wood pile, and 2 years later It looked water was still sheening right off of it. Oh, firework. Oh yeah, you saw that. So it got me thinking, hey, I got no reason to do a bed sheet. I got no shortage of tarps, and I don't really tarp much outside anyway. My tarps are normally used for camping or hiking or whatever. So I'm okay with replacing them yearly or every 2 years or whatever. But as far as my pack goes, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do it before any of my long trips or just wait till the winter season. I'm not really sure. I haven't decided, but I bought everything to do it. I got the silicone, I got the mineral spirits, I bought a bucket. I just got the pack's all got to come apart just so I can get it down to the actual pack itself, and then coat it, let it dry, and see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I ruined the damn thing, and I got to order another one, which they're available. You can get the large Alice pack. My frame is a large frame, but originally it had a medium pack on it, and I got rid of that. It shredded, and I used it for so long, so I upgraded to a large pack. And I don't even know whatever happened to the second frame. I maybe gave it away or threw it away, or who knows. But that's an upcoming video. Now, the videos that I'm going to drop today, completely different topic. I was thinking about it. The wife was scrolling on Pinterest, and she saw this recipe, and it had like ground beef and peppers, and it looked like something that I could make at a campsite. And she's like, hey, check this out. This looks like a pretty good recipe. It looks delicious, and it looks like something simple enough that you could make at, while we're camping at a campsite. And that got me thinking, hey, what if I uploaded a video of the stuff that I do make at campsites? Because I don't do hot dog on a stick. Way past that. I don't do cold Pop-Tarts in the morning for breakfast. I have. Every now and again I'll get a pizza and bring with me, but it's really only good for that day or at the most overnight, because a pizza box doesn't fit in a cooler. So you got to take it out of the box and then burn the box and put it in Ziploc bags. And I'm more of a fan of actually buying food and doing some prep work at home and then packing it in the cooler, taking it with me camping. And I'm not talking about backpacking. That's another. This is car camping here, which the level of car camping that I'm doing is really glamping, because I got a pickup truck full of gear that I take with me and set it all up, my outdoor kitchen. And so I made a video, two actually, of one's a breakfast and one is a dinner. I generally don't do a lot of cooking for lunch, generally like lunch meat or something, but normally my breakfast, gets me, enough to where I don't need anything but snacks during the day, and then I make dinner. So I got two videos dropping today. In fact, let's do that right now. Let's drop those videos today, right now. The first one is, I call it the Western Omelet Burrito. You can check it out. It is now public. There it is. There's the breakfast that I make. So what I did is I took my entire camp kitchen out to the backyard. I didn't do this while I was camping because I didn't have a trip, planned. And I wanted to kind of get this out before 4th of July, because I know everybody's got big trips planned for 4th of July. I actually canceled mine because of all the stuff that's going on right now. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I took everything outside into the backyard and actually made the meal right there, just like I would as if I was at my campsite. So it's doable, and the first one is, I just dropped it, so it's available. You can check it out, is Western Omelet Breakfast Burritos. They are a huge favorite in my family. It's if we go camping and I don't make those, they get mad at me, because they are absolutely delicious and they're simple to make. It's one pot, not a lot of cleanup, and I'm not a big fan of cleanup at a campsite. I'm not there to make big, huge messes. I'm there to get it done and make it convenient, because I'm camping. I'm there to relax, not make more work for myself. So a breakfast burrito, big hit. Everybody loves them. Doesn't take up a lot of space in the cooler. I do a little bit of prep work at home. You'll see in the video where I get some things prepared. beforehand, just so I don't have to prep it all at the campsite. I could just start pulling it out the cooler, throw it together, and boom, everybody has breakfast. Everybody's happy. The second one is, let's make that one public. The second one is, believe it or not, what I call Camp Scampi. And yes, it's shrimp scampi at the campsite. Uh, I boil my pasta because my camp stove is 2 burners, so I can run 2 things at once. And I have other things I can take that I take with me, but this can be done just with 2 burners. And technically, you could do it with 1 burner. If that's all you had, it'd be a little more challenging, just like doing it over an open fire. You could still do it. I have the convenience of a dual fuel Coleman camp stove that was my grandfather's. It's way older than I am, and it still works like a champ. You put the fuel in it, you pump it up, you light the burner, and boom, it cooks your food. So the second one is what I call Camp Scampi, and it's basically shrimp scampi at a campsite, and that's what I do. I'll take some romaine lettuce and some Parmesan cheese, and I'll put together, because I already have the Parmesan with me, and I'll put together a little Caesar salad, and I got this big, warm, steamy, delicious plate of pasta with shrimp and butter and garlic. Oh, it's absolutely fabulous, and it's really simple to make. It all goes in one pot, except for the pasta. You boil that separately, obviously. But yeah, those are 2 of my favorites. So I just dropped the videos. I did put the recipe, well, I put the ingredients list in the description, just so you don't have to take notes while you're watching it, if you decide to watch it. But you can watch the video to see how I do it. It's very simple, and I got tons of these, tons of different recipes I take that I utilize when I'm camping. I don't make the same thing every day. Usually I have one night where I do the scampi. I have done the burritos several mornings because they're a big hit. Nobody complains about me serving them every morning. Sometimes I'll mix it up and just tweak it a little bit. Instead of putting the sausage in the burrito, I do the burrito with the peppers and the onions and the egg and the cheese, and then I'll do sausage separately. Or I've even done pancakes. That's another big one. Pancakes at a campsite. They sell those little bottles of pancake mix that are pre-measured. You just add the water and shake it up, and I think it's called shake and pour or something. I've seen them in the grocery store. I've used them dozens of times for 20 years. They're great. You just add water in this little bottle, shake it up, dump it in your pan, and boom, you got a pancake. But the burritos are always a big hit, and the scampi is a big hit. So I think they're actually going to hit Instagram. My other half has Instagram and Pinterest, and I'm pretty sure she's going to load those. I may condense the video down to make it one of those ones that like moves in double speed with just a voiceover in the back. I don't know. I got to figure out how to do that. But I'll probably figure that out this week, because I wanted to get those out before 4th of July, for people who are going camping and, are kind of have always restricted themselves or limited themselves to a hot dog on a stick, or, other. It opens up new possibilities for people, and, so enjoy. I did make them right there, and I actually ate one of the burritos right on camera. The shrimp scampi I did not eat on camera, but after I did make it outside at my camp kitchen, I brought it in the house and we had it for dinner. In fact, there was leftovers the next day, and I think my daughter ate the leftovers for lunch the next day, because that's one of her favorites that I make. So enjoy. And I'm going to start, because we're in that camping season, I'm definitely going to take the camera with me when camping. So there may be some other recipes or camp dishes that I make that I'll put out there. So we'll see what the future holds. I got a lot of thoughts. I got a lot of probabilities as to what I'm going to do. So we'll see how it goes. I'm having fun with it. I hope some of y'all watching are enjoying it or having fun with it. So that covers that. My new videos, the kind of direction. I guess now we got to talk about the elephant in the room, man. The reason I was late this morning and didn't get on here till 10 o'clock is I was watching the news conference, man. I'm just as freaked out as everybody else is. A part of me saw it coming. I could tell by the past week, the way, politicians, were posturing, I knew something was happening. I could just sense it. And sure enough, last night we had a nice dinner. I grilled, I cooked out on the grill, and we sat down and had a nice dinner. And I got some sparklers at the grocery store yesterday, and I got some stuff to make s'mores. And I told everybody, I was like, hey, I'm gonna light a fire in the backyard, and we'll sit around. Once the sun goes down and it's not so hot, I think it'll be a nice evening. We'll sit around and enjoy a campfire, in the backyard. Um, make some s'mores and light some sparklers, and and in between cleaning up dinner, which I don't do. I cook the meals. She cleans up the mess. So I got to give her props for that. I'd rather cook the meal than clean the mess up, but anyway, once the dinner mess was basically cleaned up, and I started setting up to go outside, I you'll see where I made the camp food videos. I also did the fire tinder video. I got the couple of blocks, in a little area where I had a barrel sitting on top. I just moved that out of the way and just put the fire there. It was already there. All I had to do was add to it and light it. And we had I had s'mores planned, and we were sit out. I figured, oh, this will be a nice, lovely evening. And in between dinner cleanup and actually getting outside is when I caught the news that we had bombed Iran. And I just, everything just kind of stopped, slowed down for a minute. I thought, wow, this ain't good. This ain't good. So my evening of sitting around in my backyard with the campfire, it kind of put a damper on things, but I drank a couple of beers, made it all better. Wife had some margaritas, made it all better. My oldest, he was out. He had some plans with some of his friends for a graduation party. One of his buddies just graduated college, and his family threw a little party for him. So he went over there. And then when he got back here, he chilled with us out there for a little bit, and it was nice. But for me personally, there was definitely just something there, that elephant in the room that, I'm still processing. And, I'll give the U.S. props for stepping up. We definitely don't want a tyrannical regime to have the ability to cause that much destruction, but we already got it. North Korea's got a freaking nuke. I mean, and that dude's about as unbalanced as they come. Whenever I watch his videos or hear anything about it, he reminds me of a big child with toys way out of his league, and it's a concern. I'm sure that the world powers watch him very carefully, because he does seem a bit unhinged. But he's got them. So how much worse could it get if Iran had them too? And can we stop them? They're a sovereign country. They pretty much do whatever the fuck they want, within reason. But I guess the U.S. finally had enough. They decided to draw that line in the sand, and they weren't going to let them cross it, I suppose. I think it concerns me in a lot of different ways. I think with the borders being open for as long as they were, I think there's no doubt that there's sleeper cells, threats that could be posed to our public life. Because remember, we're pretty isolated here. We got oceans on both sides. We got fairly peaceful nations to the north and the south. We're pretty protected here, as a country. But that doesn't mean that something biological or a cyber attack, or there's definitely threats that we have to watch out for. And I really pray for everyone that nothing bad happens, and nobody, falls victim to, some sort of tragedy that, just really isn't necessary. I understand that Trump and, his people, they tried diligently to negotiate and set up meetings and have conversations. And I get that, and I also see that Iran wanted no parts of it, and I get that. And really, does it come a time where you have to use force? I guess it does. It doesn't, I'm still on the fence about it. I don't like the fact that it happened. I understand why it happened, um, but it still concerns me. Um, the the possibility of where it could lead concerns me, and of course, it falls back onto emergency preparedness for me. Uh, if there's a cyber attack and we lose power, electricity just shuts down. Um, how am I going to be able to fare with my family? Can I pull it off? I hope so. I don't have an unlimited supply of fuel and a generator that can just kick on and life would continue as normal for me, because it's not going to be that way for anyone. Uh, I don't care how much fuel you got stored. Eventually, you're going to run out. Eventually the light's not going to come on when you flick the switch because there's nothing to make the generator run. And solar is a good option. I don't have solar, but I know the efficiency of solar panels and the battery generators isn't 100% solid. I think the last time I checked, efficiency on solar energy was only like 23%. Uh, so yes, it can provide some power, but how long is that sustainable? And what do you do when the sun doesn't come out for days and days and days? And we've had that. Now, if you live in the desert where the sun comes out every day, then you're probably okay, or at least going to be able to be okay longer. But for areas where we get weather changes, um, it's not guaranteed. So there's going to have to be other means of survival. Really, it's what it comes down to. Is without power, most people have electric stoves. How you going to cook? You can't turn the stove on. You can't cook food. Um, Grocery stores need light and electricity to run their freezers and their refrigerators, and without power, there's no fuel. There's no fuel to put in the trucks to get the supplies to the store. So it could get very dangerous. I really hope it doesn't, but I do feel that we're probably going to see some changes, and just our normal way of life is going to be altered. I think the price of fuel is going to go up. I think we're going to see $150 a barrel. It won't be pretty. If you all remember back in like '05, '06, '07, '08, right there towards the tail end of GW, his term into Obama's term, I think fuel was up over $4 a gallon in some places. I know I was spending a fortune in fuel. Uh, Driving a full-size pickup truck, I was spending a fortune in fuel. It was not easy. Now, granted, the economy was a little bit better back then, so it wasn't as difficult. But I think with as much of a crunch as most of us have been under the past few years, if fuel does go to $4 to $5 a gallon, that's going to cause havoc for a lot of people. A lot of people aren't going to be able to afford to put gas in their car. You're gonna have that choice. Do I put gas in the car, or do I put groceries in the pantry? I can't do both. It's going to be one or the other. Put the gas in the car to go to work, so I can earn the money to put gas in the car to go to work, to earn the money to put the gas. It's going to be a never-ending cycle, and your pantry is just going to dwindle. So I don't know how it's going to go. I'm certainly concerned. I know I scrolled through the feed last night right after I heard it, and there was a lot of news updates. And then this morning I scrolled through, and it seems all the prepper channels are predicting the end of the world. Of course, um, I don't know if it's going to be the end of the world. I do think things are going to change for us. So I think we all have to acknowledge that and bicycle ready. I got one. I got one bicycle. There's 5 of us that live in the house. I got one bicycle. Um, Probably a bad choice of mine to only have one bicycle. In fact, that one bicycle, it's in the shed, and I was in the shed yesterday to get the pressure washer out because I haven't used it yet this year. So I drug the pressure washer out. I'm going to do the deck, the patio and the deck today when I'm done this. And I noticed when I moved the bicycle out of the way, the tire's flat. And I thought to myself, I should probably get a hand pump, one of those ones you step on it or something, because I don't even have a hand pump. So that tire's flat. I can't do nothing about it. I got an air compressor in the back room here that has a hard line, goes all the way to the garage. The compressor runs in the utility room, and then there's an air line that runs all the way to the garage so I don't have to drag the compressor outside every time I need to use it. I just come down here, I turn it on, it makes air, and then I can use it at the garage to pump up a tire or whatever. But without electricity, how the fuck am I going to make air? I can't. I'm going to need a hand pump for the one bicycle that I got. So, as long as I've been doing this, there's still a lot of holes and gaps in my stuff, and you don't really notice them until it hits you in the face, to where you end up being reactive instead of proactive. Being proactive is Dead Wolf here. He's got a bicycle. That's being proactive. I only have one for 5 people. That's not proactive. That's going to be reactive. Now what do we do? We're going to take turns. 4 of us will walk, 1 of us will ride. Whoever's riding will stop 10 miles up the road till we all catch up, and then we'll switch it up. I don't think so. You foot pump and a patch kit on the bikes and car. That's smart. I do keep tire plugs. I keep a plug kit in my truck, but I don't have an air compressor. And I have a little thing that plugs into the cigarette lighter port that it will barely pump up a truck tire. Barely. It gets enough air in it to where I can actually get to a gas station, but this little 12-volt thing, I got 18 or 20-inch wheels on my truck. I don't know, whatever's on it. And, they take 42 or 44 pound of air, and that little thing struggles. You can hear it screaming when it's trying to make that much. Now, it'll do 20, 30 pound of air. So if I had like a regular car that only had like 32 pounds of air in the tire, that thing probably, and that's probably what it's designed for. So I have considered putting some gear in my truck, back in the bed all the way in the front against the back window, put in a shelf, because I have a cap on my truck. So I put in a shelf, at the window level, and put a pancake compressor and a small gas generator in there, till I could, put some gas in. If anything, I could siphon some gas out of the gas tank, put it in the generator, run the generator to power the air compressor to pump it. But that's a lot of work. So I don't know if I'm going to spend that much money or do that much. So I don't know, a lot to think about, but again, the elephant in the room is, where we are now, and, what's going to be the reaction, or how is Iran going to, retaliate? Because, they will. Another thing that concerns me is I saw reports about China bringing in cargo planes, turning their transponders off once they hit Iranian airspace. And that's suspicious. First of all, what were they hauling in cargo? 747 size cargo planes, not passenger planes, cargo planes, the size of a 747. That's a big plane. That's C-130 or bigger. That's big stuff. Whatever they were flying in was big. It wasn't like bringing in a couple cans or some cases of bottles, a couple pallets of bottled water or something. They were bringing in something big. And turning off their transponders to get it there, that means they couldn't be tracked or where they dropped it off at. So that to me is questionable. Yeah, not what we voted for. Not at all. I agree. 100% not what we voted for. Not what I wanted. I'm disappointed. I understand why. I understand the risks, but is the reward really worth the risk? That's my question. And not everybody's going to feel the same way, and I get that. And we're all entitled to their own, our own opinion. Some people think, oh, it's great, let's wipe Iran off, they're horrible. And I get that people feel that way. I personally don't, because Iran's never really done anything that affected me directly. Whatever trouble they cause in the Middle East, to me, that's the Middle East problem. Let them fight it out. We got our own problems here in this country. We don't need to take on theirs too, but that just seems to be the norm for, America. And it's, been that way since before. I mean, there were some issues in Korea back in the late 40s. And what did we do? We went and stuck our nose in it. Really didn't work out too well for us. We really didn't accomplish much. They still are a divided country of North and South. They're always going to be that way. They were that way before. They're that way now. We didn't solve or accomplish anything. Vietnam was the same thing. There were some issues going on over there between one country that North, it was a division, and North one, South the other. We went over there, we stuck our nose in it. We really didn't accomplish much. They're still a divided country that don't get along. They hate each other. They live right next door to each other and they can't even get along. They don't have to be friends, but they don't have to be enemies. Um, Same with Afghanistan and the Middle East. We've stuck our nose in those conflicts and trying to be the world's police. And that I don't agree with at all. I don't think America should be the world's police. But it is what it is. And now we are where we are. So preparedness is key. You got to make sure you got the basics covered. You got to make sure you have, I know FEMA says 3 days worth of food, and you see various prepper channels saying, a week or 10 days or whatever. No. I think if you have nothing stored, you should start storing things. Fill up your pantry, fill up your closets. Don't buy stuff you don't eat. Don't go spending a fortune on these, ready-wise, dehydrated meals that you've never eaten before thinking, oh, that'll be perfect. No, buy what you eat. If you eat green giant green beans, then buy green giant green beans, for crying out loud. Buy what you eat normally and store it. Now obviously things like meats and vegetables, they don't have a lot of long-term storage in those unless you can them or do something, additional. So I really wouldn't suggest stocking up on that kind of stuff, because if we lose power, your refrigerator and your freezer are on a time schedule at that point. So, but as far as your non-perishable goods, and we all know what non-perishable goods are. I mean, rice-a-roni and a can of chicken. You put the two together, you got a meal. And all it takes is water and fire to make that happen. And there's a ton of those. Maybe I'll do a video about that. I don't know. There's a ton of different options that you can choose from. But buy what you eat, and just start buying it. Every time you go to the grocery store, spend a few extra bucks, $5-10. Doesn't take much. It adds up quickly. Believe me, I've been doing this for 35 years. It adds up quickly. You end up with more. Then you start realizing, well, shit, I got so much stuff. I got to start rotating it, because I got these canned goods here that are 4 years old. And we're right at the limit of their best buy. Not that they're expired at that point, but you want to keep your rotation. And there's tons of videos on that, making spreadsheets and rotating all your stuff. You can watch somebody else's channel to get that nonsense. But I would definitely make sure that, I think 30 days minimum, absolute minimum 30 days. I'd shoot for 3 to 6 months, because if we do see shortages in our transportation of goods around the globe, global commerce, whatever you want to call it, things are going to get hard to get, because it's not going to be as much on the shelf, and that's going to cause the prices to go up. So it's going to get a little more expensive. Instead of buying 10 cans of green beans, you may be only able to get 3 cans of green beans. But I would buy a couple extra things at the grocery store every time you go, just to start putting some stuff back. And I would 30 days minimum, and I would even shoot for as much as 6 months. If your preps or your pantry is giving you that 6 to 12 month time frame, then I'd feel pretty comfortable. I'm somewhere in that 6 to 12 months. I'm pretty sure I can roll 6. I'm not sure if I could make it to 12 unless I kind of stretched it and and thought about it very carefully as far as calories and how many people I got to feed, yada yada yada. But I think I fall somewhere in that 6 to 12 month realm. I've never actually done a full inventory and calculated it. That's a lot of work. But just from what I have and how often I go through stuff and how I rotate stuff, I'm somewhere in that 6 to 12 month range, which is I think where most people should be. Growing up as a kid, my grandparents were 6 months. They had a garden and they canned their vegetables, and they had a big chest freezer down the basement. Now again, if the power goes out, that chest freezer is only good so long, because I have a chest freezer in the basement. But I'm pretty certain that my grandparents were at that level that, if they didn't have to go to the grocery store or couldn't go to the grocery store, they would have enough food in the house to last about 6 months. probably because it was seasonal for their, they knew that 6 months the garden would be going again. They could start canning and eating from the garden. And, so I think that was my grandparents' gauge. I don't know. My grandfather passed away before I was old enough to really have all this processed. So I couldn't ask these big questions from him. Um, yeah, I wish I could have. But again, I'm somewhere in that and I would recommend shooting for that. Having a way to filter water. Um, that's important. You can store it, but you can only store so much. Now it has a forever shelf life. It may need shaking up a little bit or some air blown in it to oxygenate it, to keep it from getting that stale taste, which it's easy to do. You just stick it in a bottle and you shake it up, and it reoxygenates the water. Or you can put it in an air pump, the one from your truck or for your bike, and pump a bunch of air in it, and that'll do it. So I would definitely recommend having water, or at least, and I wouldn't put a time frame on that. Having some bottled water stored is great, but I would recommend having a way to filter water, because there's water everywhere except for in the desert. I know where I live, there's no shortage of creeks and streams and tributaries to where I can get water fairly easily. As long as it's raining, there's water coming down and it's collecting somewhere. So, for me, having a way to filter that water and make it drinkable is more important than storing, 5,000 gallons of water. Now, if I lived in the desert where it doesn't rain very often and water's harder to come by, then I would probably consider storing thousands of gallons of water. But where I'm at, I don't think it's necessary to have that much water stored. Um, Shelter, your house. I know basically your house is your shelter, unless you have to abandon your house. But, for the most part, your house is your shelter. So, with that, you want to know, or at least you want to kind of acknowledge the fact that you need maintenance. If a window gets broken, do you have some extra panes of glass, or do you have some cardboard and some duct tape? You can tape the window up. If the roof starts leaking, do you have a tarp? So you have to be able to maintain your shelter, which is your house. So most people have this kind of stuff around, but I would at least process it in your head a little bit, to make sure that, if there's a window gets broken, or, your roof starts leaking, or something ridiculous. Screens are a huge thing. We've taken most of the screens out of the windows in the front of the house for aesthetic purposes. We run the central air 99% of the time. Um, try to cut down on the seasonal allergies. Several of us in the house get seasonal allergies. So, having the windows open and the fresh air, which I love, coming in, can be detrimental. It gets you stuffy and clogged up, and, you get the seasonal allergies. Now, having those screens is important, because if I was to lose power, I can't run the central air. And the temperatures that they're expecting in my region next week, up in the upper 90s, tipping 100, without open windows, this is a death trap, man. So having those screens to where I could put those screens in and open the windows to get some airflow, that's important. So, if you live in a house or an apartment or a condo, that doesn't have screens, or your screens are damaged, I would definitely look into, it doesn't take much to go to Home Depot and get a roll of screen and one of those little pizza cutter looking tools and fix the screens. It's not hard to do. You can watch a YouTube video. I fixed several screens in my house. The backside still has all the screens in it. And occasionally the dog jumps on the windowsill and her nails scratch it, and the screens have gotten damaged. So I've replaced a couple of those. And, I went to Home Depot. I bought a roll of the screen stuff and the gasket stuff that goes in. I took them apart. I put them out on a workbench, and I took them all apart, and I laid it down and fixed it all up and put the screen back in. Can't even tell. But because you don't want holes in your screens, that allows the bugs to come in. Food, water, shelter, medical. Obviously, if you're on regular medications, you want to talk to your doctor about getting an additional supply. I know there's websites online that will give you longer than, they'll give you a 60-day supply or whatever. So you definitely want to look into that. But simple over-the-counter meds, cough medicine, cough drops, decongestants, aspirin, Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, you know, stock up on that stuff. I get it at Costco in big bottles, it's cheaper. And then we keep the small bottles in the medicine cabinet upstairs. When the little bottle gets empty, I bring it down here and I dump it out of the big bottle and stick it back up there. But keeping that stuff around. One thing that was pointed out to me that I never talk about, and I probably should because I don't stock it and I don't prep for it. It's not something I've ever even considered, is lady part products. If you have ladies in the house, you're going to need lady part products. You know what they are. You got to consider that. I know that shit ain't cheap, but you got to consider it because Flo is still going to show up if shit hits the fan. She don't care. She's going to show up every 28 days or 26 days or whatever this, whatever it is, lady part products. And that's something I got to start working on. It was pointed out to me, a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, shit, you're right. I don't have nothing. I don't personally need it, but I do have two people in my house that do need it. And if things go south, that imagine what a pain in the royal ass it's going to be for them to have to go without those products. That's going to be difficult. And so, lady part, but your medical, your hygiene, having a few extra toothbrushes and toothpaste. And I'm a big fan of plain Jane brown Listerine antiseptic. You can use it as a topical. You can use it as a mouthwash, stuff like that. You're still going to have to clean yourself. So having, wipes or soap, shampoo, if things go south and, the doodle hits the poodle, as JR from DIY Prepper says, it's one of my favorites, the doodle hits the poodle. If the doodle hits the poodle, there's going to be some stinky sons of bitches around because a lot of people aren't going to be able to take a bath. So and it makes you feel a little bit better, to clean yourself up. It's like working outside in the yard or going to your job and you work all day long and you're hot and sweaty and, you just feel miserable. You're drained, taking a nice shower peps you up a little bit. It's a thing that makes you feel a bit better. It's a pick me up. So yeah, having that kind of stuff, the soap, I would suggest having some sort of cordage that you can makeshift a clothesline, maybe some 5-gallon buckets or a plastic bin that you could use for washing, because you're going to have to wash clothes, you're going to have to wash towels, things like that. There's going to be other things that you need if that time comes, because if there's no electricity, the washing machine ain't going to work. The dryer ain't going to work. I bought a pack of clothesline. I think it's 100 foot. I haven't even opened it yet. I bought that and I bought some stuff to where I could hook it, and makeshift a clothesline. And I bought some old school wooden clothespins, and I keep them in the back in case, if I have to hand wash clothes, I have a place to hang them up so they can dry, which would be a clothesline. You got to go old school with it. So that kind of stuff. And then, of course, security. We've talked about that, home defense, personal security. If the power goes out and you don't have your outdoor lights or your motion activated lights, or, you're definitely going to need flashlights and candles and things. I would suggest practicing light discipline in that kind of situation, because he who has nothing is going to be attracted to he who has something. So you got to kind of exercise some discipline in that. But, your food, your water, your shelter, your medical, and your defense. Those are the 5 absolute necessities. We can sit here all we want and say that, oh, I get along great with all my neighbors. Okay, well, right now your neighbor's children aren't starving. Your neighbor's family isn't dying of dehydration. How desperate is your neighbor going to get if that does happen? Is he going to come after you? I pray to God my neighbors don't come after me. I don't know if they're prepared. I don't know what they have. I don't discuss this topic with any of my neighbors. I wouldn't suggest you do either. Whatever your preparations are, keep it to yourself. Your immediate family can know about it, but other than that, I would suggest keeping it to yourself, because When people get desperate, they come knocking. And a guy who comes knocking will ask first, and then he will try to barter, and then he will beg, and then he will try to take it by force. And these are proven facts worldwide that that's how people react. First they ask, and then they try to barter, and then they beg, and then they try to take by force. So if you don't have a way to defend yourself, you'll be the guy that has nothing. And without a way to defend yourself, you're going to end up with nothing. Somebody will come along and take it from you, and they could take more than your food. You know, God forbid anybody has a family member get hurt or much less killed, over some bottled water or a can of tuna or something that's utterly ridiculous. We're all there to help our neighbors, and we don't have any problem lending them a snow shovel, or a cup of sugar, but when times are tough and people are desperate, you got to consider that. So, I don't think it's the wrong way to feel or to be. I think when people come together as a community, because somebody who doesn't have access to clean water, but they're willing to help, now you have a bigger group. So, you got to kind of watch, because you can increase the size of your group, providing it's sustainable for that size of group. Meaning, if you got to like Dead Wolf here, he's got to cut some firewood. He said, yeah, he's got some firework to do, some firewood work to do, and I know what it's like processing firewood. I lived with my primary heat source being a wood stove for a little over 10 years. That was my only source of heat, was a wood stove, and it worked great. I had plenty of fuel in my property. I could cut down trees, let them season, cut them, split them, stack them. Come wintertime, start loading the stove, boom, heat the whole house. It was lovely. I kind of miss it, actually. Not the work. I miss the wood stove. But anyway, so having somebody, if you can provide fresh water for somebody who is able-bodied that can help you process firewood, that's a good trade-off, in my opinion. So you got to kind of keep those things in mind as well. So that's the elephant in the room, man. I didn't want to have to talk about that. I swore up and down I would never go into politics or religion on my channel, because it's not really what I'm here to do. But I felt like I had to, just touch on that a little bit. Not so much the political part of it, but the possibility of how it could affect us as citizens and in our day-to-day lives. So, again, I'm going to say it again: food, water, shelter, medical, and that's also hygiene and security. Having a huge gun collection and no shortage of ammo, and I've seen this many times online. People say, that's all you need, because if shit hits the fan, I'll just go take what I need. Okay, well, those people that have the food, the water, and the shelter, and the medical, they generally have that part of it too. So you're not just going to go take something from a lot of people. A lot of people are going to put up a fight, and now it just gets even uglier, because you didn't. All you bought was guns and ammo. You didn't prepare, and now you're going to put yourself and your family at risk trying to take something from someone. That's utterly fucking ridiculous. And I would never think that way. But I know there are people who do. That show that was on 20 years ago, the Doomsday Preppers, I remember seeing one guy who said, I don't need all that stuff, because, when it gets out of control, I'm just going to go take whatever I need by force. I don't know if that's such a good idea, man. There's a lot of people out there that have that one. They got security covered. They're not going to let you just take it by force. They're going to put up a fight, and it's going to get ugly. So that I would not recommend. That, notice it was last on my list. It's important, but it's not important as food and water and shelter. That to me is the priority. Rule of threes here, people. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. That's what you have to consider. You have to consider the fact that right by my side, well, I don't know where you are, I don't know if you know where I'm at, but I'm the same way. I got people that live around me. I'm more than happy to create that community. I'm not sure where everyone stands, but I'm really not going to be sure where everyone stands until that happens, because it hasn't happened yet, and it's not really a conversation. People can look at you weird, you know, when you talk about this kind of stuff. They think you're paranoid or whatever, and I don't give two shits about that. Uh, if it never happens, wonderful. I'm ecstatic. I don't want it to happen. I don't want to ever have to dive into, I'm perfectly fine with having my pantry in the kitchen and my secondary pantry in the basement and keep my rotation going. And when my day finally comes where I kick the bucket, my kids can split it up between them or throw it in a dumpster. I don't care what they do with it. I'll be dead. So, you know, having that community would be helpful, and I'd be open to it, but I would certainly be skeptical as to everyone's intentions, and that's really what you got, because some people could play the role, talk the talk, but as soon as you feel you're comfortable enough and can lay down and get a good night's sleep, they pack all your shit in their truck and they're gone. So again, a lot to think about. And again, I didn't want to dive too deep on that, but I at least wanted to touch base on it, just so we all know. And we all watch the news, we all see the news feed, and we all know what's going on. And I really hope everyone, takes a few steps to be a little bit better prepared. Just so we don't have that one group that thinks that, oh, they're just going to go take what they need. I really hope that doesn't happen. That I hope people come together and our communities grow and help each other out, and that's how I would prefer to see it. But you have to be prepared for it to not be that way. Um, Food, fuel, shelter, tools to keep all that. That's it exactly. That's, don't forget water. Food, fuel, shelter. Gotta have water. Um, but I get your point, and I agree 100%. So I hope more people listen. I hope my uh, task as to making videos to all 102 subscribers or whoever else that watches, just thinks for a second, hey, I got about a week's worth of stuff in the pantry, but maybe I should have 2 or 3 weeks worth. Let me start buying a couple extra things, or let me stash a couple of extra water filters, maybe a Life Straw or a Sawyer or something. You don't have to go as far as building some big DIY thing, which really doesn't cost that much money, but unless you have a little bit of mechanical ability and knowledge, you're going to be at the mercy of a YouTube video. But you don't have to go that route. You can get a Life Straw. I got a box of them back there. You saw in my budget bag. I stuck a Life Straw in there, whatever brand it is. I don't think it's Life Straw, but excuse me. But I have Sawyer Minis. Even one of them is better than nothing. So again, I hope people, take heed and acknowledge that, this escalation in the Middle East could have repercussions felt. I didn't even touch on the sleeper cell thing. That's a whole nother demon. I don't want to talk about that. We all know it's possible. And I'll close this video out with the same thing I always say. No, exactly. It's going to be necessary for survival. Dead wolf. Exactly. And speaking of wolves, people could learn a lot about wolves, or they could learn a lot by watching wolves. Wolves are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. That's why they survive. And I've always watched them, on TV, and I've only seen them live a couple of times. But I've watched them, documentaries and National Geographic and all that. And wolves are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And they survive. That's just, they have a hierarchy, and they're organized, and they make sure everybody gets fed, and they make sure that, the weak are cared for, smart animals. So, all right, with that, a lone wolf is a dead wolf. That is 100% correct. The lone wolf does not survive. We've heard the term, it takes a village, and that is 100% correct. So with that, Dead Wolf, I appreciate you hanging out with me. Good luck with your firewood. I'm going to go and pressure wash the patio and the patio furniture because pollen's all over it, and it gets all over you when you sit out there. I really wish the best for people. I hope this video helps. It'll repost later, and of course my camp food videos. 100%. Yeah, appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Uh, so I hope it helps. If anybody makes the camp, and you can make them in your kitchen too. You don't have to do it at a campsite. You can make them in the kitchen. That's how I came up with the damn recipes. Is I made them in the kitchen and was like, I can make this camping. So if anybody does that, let me know how it worked out for you and if you enjoyed it. Otherwise, keep your head on a swivel, people. You always got to know what's going on around you. Surprises end up being reactive. Keeping your head on a swivel, that's proactive. Watching what's going on. So until next time, again, keep your head on a swivel, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.